Alright, hello citizens of the Nigelverse. It is Nigel here once again, and welcome back to the Labyrinth. Last week, and by last week I mean on Monday, because it was late, we looked at Act 1 of Romeo and Juliet. We began our journey through Romeo and Juliet. We met at most of our characters, Romeo, Juliet, at some of the Montagues, some of the Capulets, and we learned that they're at war with each other, but Romeo and Juliet, star-crossed lovers, have fallen in love, even though their families are at war. So how will the story unfold from here? Let's find out now as we hop into Act 2 of Romeo and Juliet. So if you haven't already, go check out Act 1 of Romeo and Juliet, but we're also going to get into Act 2 here. Here we have the synopsis. And we have our scenes as per usual. And I forgot to mention last time, or I think I forgot to mention last time, is that this is courtesy of the Folger Shakespeare Library at folger.edu. If you want to check it out for yourself, the entire play is here. So without further ado, let's get right back into it. We start with Act 2 here, and this is the chorus. So, kind of the chorus slash like prologue, similar to what they did for Act 1. So, the synopsis of this is that, again, the chorus of speech is in the form of a sonnet. And so, enter chorus, and for each character, I'm going to be saying their name and then saying what they said, essentially. And I know it kind of breaks up what is kind of breaks up the dialogue a little bit, and it will come out kind of weird, but that's for the sake of knowing what character says what. Anyway, this is the chorus, and they say, "Now old desire doth in his deathbed lie, and young affection gapes to be his heir. That fair for which love groaned for and would die, with tender Juliet matched, is now not fair. Now Romeo is beloved and loves again, alike bewitched by the charm of looks. But to his foe suppose he must complain, and she still loves sweet bait from fearful hooks. Being held a foe, he may not have access to breathe such vows as lovers used to swear. As she is much in love, her means much less to meet her new beloved anywhere. But passion lends them power time means to meet, tempering extremities with extreme sweet." And the course exits. Now let's get into scene 1 of Act 2 here. The synopsis here is Romeo finds himself so in love with Juliet that he cannot leave her, and he scales a wall and enters her Capulet's garden. Meanwhile, Benvolio and Mercutio look for him in vain. Enter Romeo alone. Can I go for? And he says, "Can I go forward when my heart is here? Turn back, dull earth, and find thy center out." And he withdraws, and then enter Benvolio with Mercutio. And Benvolio says, "Romeo, my cousin, Romeo, Romeo." And Mercutio says, "He is wise, and, on my life, hath stolen him home to bed." And Benvolio says, "He ran this way and leapt this orchard wall. Call, good Mercutio." And Mercutio, or actually, I think it's supposed to be Mercutio saying this. "Nay, I'll conjure too. Romeo, humors, madman, passion, lover, appear thou in the likeness of a sigh. Speak but one rhyme and I am satisfied. Cry but I me, pronounce but love and dove. Speak to my gossip Venus one fair word, one nickname for her purblind son and heir, young Abraham Cupid, he that shot so trim, when King Cophetua loved the beggar maid. He heareth not, he stirreth not, he moveth not. The ape is dead, and I must conjure him. I conjure thee by Rosaline's bright eyes, by her high forehead and her scarlet lip, by her fine foot, straight leg, and quivering thigh, and the demesnes, I think that I pronounced that right, and the demesnes that there adjacent lie, that in thy likeness thou appear to us." And Benvolio says, "And if he hear thee, thou wilt anger him." And Mercutio says, "This cannot anger him. 'Twould anger him to raise a spirit in his mistress's circle of some strange nature, letting it there stand till she had laid it and conjured it down. That were some spite. My invocation is fair and honest. In his mistress's name, I conjure only but to raise him up. And Benvolio says, Come, he hath hid himself among these trees, to be consorted with the humorous night. Blind is his love, and best benefits the dark. And Mercutio says, If love be blind, love cannot hit the mark. Now will he sit under a medlar tree, and wish his mistress were that kind of fruit, as maids call medlars when they laugh alone. O Romeo, that she were! Oh, that she were! An open arse, thou a poprin pear. Romeo, good night. I'll to my truckle bed. This field bed is too cold for me to sleep. Come, shall we go? And Benvolio says, Go, then, for 'tis in vain to seek him here that he's not to be found. And they exit it. And so pretty much, like the synopsis said, Romeo goes into the garden, is hiding out, and doesn't really want to be found. At least that's what Benvolio says. So Benvolio and Mercutio attempt to find him, and they can't find him. Mercutio said he's probably gone. He probably went home and stuff. But Benvolio said he's definitely over here. Tells Mercutio to call him. So Mercutio jokes around a little bit, stuff like that. But Benvolio assumes that if he can't be found in the garden, that means he doesn't want to be found for whatever reason. So they kind of just give up and go from there. But we're not quite done in this garden yet. So let's move into scene 2 here. So the synopsis is from Capulet's garden, Romeo overhears Juliet express her love for him. When he answers her, they acknowledge their love and their desire to be married. And so Romeo comes forward, and Romeo says he jests at scars that never felt a wound. And then enter Juliet above. But soft, what light through yonder window breaks? It is the east, and Juliet is the sun. Arise, fair sun, and kill the envious moon, who is already sick and pale with grief, that thou, her maid, art far more fair than she. Be not her maid, since she is envious. Her vestal livery is but sick and green, and none but fools do wear it. Cast it off. It is my lady, oh, it is my love. Oh, that she knew she were. She speaks, yet she says nothing. What of that? Her eye discourses. I will answer it. I am too bold. 'Tis not to me she speaks. Two of the fairest stars in all the heaven, having some business, do entreat her eyes to twinkle in their spheres till they return. What if her eyes were there, they in her head? The brightness of her cheek would shame those stars. As daylight doth a lamp, and her eye in heaven would through the airy region stream so bright, that birds would sing and think it were not night. See how she leans her cheek upon her hand. Oh, that I were a glove upon that hand, that I might touch that cheek. And Juliet says, I, me. And Romeo, as an aside, meaning off to the side, saying, she speaks. Oh, speak again, bright angel, for thou art as glorious to this night, being o'er my head, as is a winged messenger of heaven, and unto the white upturned wandering eyes of mortals that fall back to gaze on him, when he bestrides the lazy puffing clouds, and sails upon the bosom of the air. And Juliet says, O Romeo, Romeo, wherefore art thou Romeo? Deny thy father and refuse thy name. Or if thou wilt not, but be but sworn in my love, and I will no longer be a Capulet, I should say. And Romeo, in another aside, says, Shall I hear more, or shall I speak at this? And then Juliet says, 'Tis but thy name that is my enemy. Thou art thyself, I should say, though not a Montague. What's Montague? It is nor hand, nor foot, nor arm, nor face. Oh, be some other name, belonging to a man. What's in a name? That which we call a rose, by any other word would smell as sweet. So Romeo would, were he not Romeo called, retain that dear perfection which he owes. Without that title, Romeo, doff thy name, and for thy name, which is no part of thee, take all myself. And Romeo says, I take thee at thy word, call me but love, and I'll be new baptized. Henceforth I never will be Romeo. And Juliet says, what man art thou that thus bescreened in night, so stumblest on my counsel? And Romeo says, by a name, I know not how to tell thee who I am. My name, dear saint, is hateful to myself, because it is an enemy to thee. Had I it written, I would tear the word. And Julia says, my ears have yet not drunk 100 words of thy tongue's uttering, yet I know the sound. Art thou not Romeo and a Montague? And Romeo says, neither, fair maid, if either thee dislike. And Julia says, how camest thou hither? Tell me, and wherefore? The orchard walls are high and hard to climb, and the place death, considering who thou art, if any of my kinsmen find thee here. And Romeo says, with love's light wings did I o'erperch these walls, for stony limits cannot hold love out, and what love can do, that dares love attempt. Therefore thy kinsmen are no stop to me. And Juliet says, if they do see thee, they will murder thee. And Romeo says, alack, there lies more peril in thine eye than 20 of their swords. Look thou but sweet, and I am proof against their enmity. And Juliet says, I would not for the world they saw thee here. And Romeo says, I have night's cloak to hide me from their eyes, and, but thou love me, let them find me here. My life were better ended by their hate than death prorogued. I think that's how it's pronounced. Prorogued, I believe. Wanting of thy love. And Juliet says, by whose direction foundest thou out this place? And Romeo says, by love, that first did prompt me to inquire. He lent me counsel, and I lent him eyes. I am no pilot, yet wert thou as far as that vast shore, washed with the farthest sea, I should adventure for such merchandise. And Juliet says, thou knowest the mask of night is on my face, else would a maiden blush bepaint my cheek. For that which thou hast heard me speak tonight, fain would I dwell on form, fain deny what I have spoke. But farewell compliment, dost thou love me? I know thou wilt say aye, and I will take thy word. Yet, if thou swearest, thou mayst prove false. At lovers' perjuries, they say, hey, Jove laughs, O gentle Romeo. If thou dost love, pronounce it faithfully. Or, if thou thinkest I am too quickly won, I'll frown and be perverse and say thee nay. So thou wilt woo, but else not for the world. In truth, fair Montague, I am too fond, and therefore thou mayst think my behaviour light. But trust me, gentleman, I'll prove more true than those that have more coying to be strange. I should have been more strange, I must confess. But that thou overheardst, I was ware, my true love passion. Therefore pardon me, and not impute this yielding to light love, which the dark night hath so discovered. And Romeo says, lady, by yonder blessed moon, I vow, that tips with silver all these fruit tree tops. And Juliet says, oh, swear not by the moon, the inconstant moon, that monthly changes in her circled orb, lest that thy love prove likewise variable. And Romeo says, what shall I swear by? And Juliet says, do not swear at all. Or, if thou wilt, swear by thy gracious self, which is the god of my idolatry, and I'll believe thee. And Romeo says, if my heart's dear love and Juliet says, well, do not swear. Although I joy in thee, I have no joy of this contract tonight. It is too rash, too unadvised, too sudden, too like the lightning, which doth cease to be ere one can say it lightens. Sweet, good night. This bud of love, by summer's ripening breath, may prove a butaceous, I believe that's how it's pronounced, may prove a butaceous flower, which when next we meet. Good night, as sweet repose and rest come to thy heart as that within my breast. And Romeo says, oh, wilt thou leave me so unsatisfied? Excuse me. And Juliet says, "What satisfaction canst thou have tonight?" And Romeo said, "The exchange of thy love's faithful vow for mine." And Juliet says, "I gave thee mine before thou didst request it, and yet I would it were to give again." And Romeo says, "Wouldst thou withdraw it? For what purpose, love?" And Juliet says, "But to be frank and give it thee again. And yet I wish but for the thing I have. My bounty is as boundless as the sea, my love as deep. The more I give to thee, the more I have, for both are infinite." Then the nurse calls from within, and then Juliet says, "I hear some noise within. Dear love, adieu. Anon, good nurse, sweet Montague, be true. Stay but a little, I will come again." And she exits. And Romeo says, "Oh, blessed night, I am afeard, being in night, all this is but a dream, too flattering sweet to be substantial." And then re-enter Juliet from above, and then Juliet says, "3 words, dear Romeo, and good night indeed. If that thy bent of love be honorable, thy purpose marriage, send me word tomorrow, by one that I'll procure to come to thee, where and what time thou wilt perform the rite, and all my fortunes at thy foot I'll lay, and follow thee, my lord, throughout the world." And then nurse within and says, "Madam," and Juliet says, "I come anon, but if thou meanest not well, I do beseech thee." And the nurse within says again, "Madam," and Juliet says, "By and by I come, to cease thy strife and lead me to my grief. Tomorrow will I send." And Romeo says, "So thrive my soul." And Juliet says, "1,000 times good night." And she exits. And Romeo says, "1,000 times the worse to want thy light. Love goes toward love as schoolboys from their books, but love from love toward school with heavy looks." And going. And so he's like leaving out. And Juliet enters from above again. Enter Juliet above again. And Juliet says, "Hist, Romeo, hist! Oh, for a falconer's voice to lure this tassel gentle back again. Bondage is hoarse and may not speak aloud. Else would I tear the cave where echo lies, and make her airy tongue more hoarse than mine, with repetition of my Romeo." And Romeo says, "It is my soul that calls upon my name. How silver sweet sound lovers' tongues by night, like softest music to attending ears." And Juliet says, "Romeo," and Romeo, I should say, says, "My dear." And Juliet says, "What o'clock tomorrow shall I send to thee?" And Romeo says, "By the hour of 9. And Juliet says, "I will not fail. 'Tis 20 year till then. I have forgot why I did call thee back." And Romeo says, "Let me stand here till thou remember it." And Juliet says, "I shall forget to have thee still stand there, remembering how I love thy company." And Romeo says, "And I'll still stay to have thee still forget, forgetting any other home but this." And Juliet says, "'Tis almost morning. I would have thee gone, and yet no farther than a wanton's bird that lets it hop a little from his hand, like a poor prisoner in his twisted gyves, and with a silken thread plucks it back again, so loving, jealous of his liberty." And Romeo says, "I would I were thy bird." And Juliet says, "Sweet, so would I. Yet I should kill thee with much cherishing. Good night, good night. Parting is such sweet sorrow, that I shall say good night till it be morrow." And then she exits. And Romeo says, "Sleep dwell upon thine eyes, I should say. Peace in thy breast. Would I were sleep, and peace so sweet to rest. And hence will I to my ghostly friar's close cell, his help to crave, and my dear hap to tell." And then he exits. So, for starters, probably one of the most recognizable scenes, in terms of like quotes and stuff like that, said often from Romeo and Juliet. You know, the Romeo, wherefore art thou Romeo, and Rose, what's her name? If we call her Rose by another name, it'll smell just as sweet. Like probably some of the most quoted and memorable lines from Romeo and Juliet. But as we can see, things moving very fast. Like, keep in mind, they had just met only a matter of hours ago. They say that it's close to morning. Juliet says it's close to morning, stuff like that. But they are moving very fast to the point where they're talking about like marriage now. Like things are moving awful fast here, and I know sometimes some relationships do move kind of fast, like maybe only a few months and then proposal, stuff like that. And me personally, maybe it's not my place to comment on this because I am kind of single at the moment. But normally I'd say probably maybe a year or two, then maybe consider proposal. But you don't want to wait too long. But at the same time, this is only a day, and barely that. That they literally still just met. And essentially they know each other for the better part of like a few hours, and they're already talking about marriage and I love you so much, stuff like that. And definitely very much in kind of like that initial honeymoon phase where you and her significant other are very much lovey-dovey with each other. But things are progressing, and Romeo talks about how he's going to consult the friar, which we are going to meet later on. But yeah, so things are progressing, like I said. So now let's move into scene 3. And the synopsis here is: determined to marry Juliet, Romeo hurries to Friar Lawrence. The friar agrees to marry them, expressing the hope that the marriage may end the feud between their families. And enter Friar Lawrence alone with a basket. And Friar Lawrence says, "The gray-eyed morn smiles on the frowning night, checkering the eastern clouds with streaks of light, and fleckled darkness like a drunkard reels from fourth days past, and Titan's fiery wheels. Now, ere the sun advanced his burning eye, the day to cheer and night's dank dew to dry." I try saying that 5 times fast. But I must upfill this oyster cage of ours with baleful weeds and precious juiced flowers. The earth that's nature's mother is her tomb. What is her burying grave? That is her womb. And from her womb children of divers kind we sucking on her natural bosom find. Many for many virtues excellent, none but for some, and yet all different. Oh, mickle is the powerful grace that lies in plants, herbs, stones, and their true qualities. For naught so vile that on earth doth live, but to the earth some special good doth give. Nor aught so good, but, strained from that fair use, revolts from true birth, stumbling on abuse. Virtue itself turns vice, being misapplied, and vice sometime by action dignified. Right, and then enter Romeo. Within the infant rind of this weak flower, poison hath residence and medicine powder. For this, being smelt with that part, cheers each part. Being tasted, stays all senses with the heart. Or two such opposed kings encamp them still. In man's as well as herbs, grace and rude will, and where the worser is predominant, full soon the canker death eats up that plant. And Romeo says, "Good morrow, father." And Friar Lawrence says, "Benedict, what early tongue so sweet saluteth me? Young son, it argues a distempered head, so soon to bid good morrow to thy bed. Care keeps his watch in every old man's eye, and where care lodges, sleep will never lie. But where unbruised youth with unstuffed brain doth couch his limbs, there golden sleep doth reign. Therefore thy earliness doth me assure thou art uproused with some distemperature. Or, if not so, then here I hit it right. Our Romeo hath not been in bed tonight." And Romeo says, "That last is true. The sweeter rest was mine." And Friar Lawrence says, "God pardon sin. Wast thou with Rosaline?" And Romeo says, "With Rosaline, my ghostly father? No. I have forgotten that name, and that name's woe." And Friar Lawrence says, "That's my good son. But where hast thou been then?" And Romeo says, "I'll tell thee ere thou ask me again. I have been feasting with mine enemy, where on a sudden one hath wounded me, that's by me wounded. Both are remedies, within thy help and holy physic lies. I bear no hatred, blessed man, for, lo, my intercession likewise steads my foe. And Friar Lawrence says, be plain, good son, and homely in thy drift. Riddling confession finds but riddling shrift. And Romeo says, then plainly know my heart's dear love is set on the fair daughter of rich Capulet. As mine on hers, so hers is set on mine, and all combine, save what thou must combine, by holy marriage. When and where and how we met, we wooed, and made exchange of vow. I'll tell thee as we pass, but this I pray, that thou consent to marry us today. And Friar Lawrence says, holy Saint Francis, what a change is here! Is Rosaline, that thou didst love so dear, so soon forsaken? Young men's love then lies, not truly in their hearts, but in their eyes. Jesu Maria, what a deal of brine hath washed thy sallow cheeks for Rosaline! How much salt water thrown away in waste, to season love, that of it doth not taste. The sun not yet thy sighs from heaven clears, thy old groans yet ringing in mine ancient ears. Lo, here upon thy cheek the stain doth sit, of an old tear that is not washed off yet. If e'er thou wast thyself, and these woes thine, and these woes were all for Rosaline, and art thou changed? Pronounce this sentence then, women may fall when there's no strength in men. And Romeo says, thou chidest of me, thou chidest me oft for loving Rosaline. And Friar Lawrence says, for doting, not for loving, pupil mine. And Romeo says, and badst me bury love. And then Friar Lawrence says, not in a grave, to lay one in, another out to have. And Romeo says, I pray thee, chide me not. Here I love now, doth grace for grace, and love for love allow. The other did not so. Oh, and Friar Lawrence says, oh, she knew well, thy love did read by rote, that could not spell. But come, young waverer, come, go with me. In one respect I'll thy assistant be, for this alliance may so happily prove to turn your household's rancour to pure love. And Romeo says, oh, let us hence, I stand on sudden haste. And Friar Lawrence says, wisely and slow, they stumble that run fast. So Romeo, like we mentioned in the previous scene, meeting up with Friar Lawrence, and Friar Lawrence and him are talking, and Romeo essentially tells him about this new love he has, Juliet. And Friar Lawrence says, "Whoa, wow, you're not into Rosaline anymore? I thought you were into her." And Romeo's like, "Nah, I'm done with her." Or there's this new girl though, this Juliet. She's the daughter of Capulet. And Friar Lawrence does point out that Romeo seems a bit lustful, a bit hasty to get it to be with Juliet and to marry them off. But he feels that at officiating the wedding and officially marrying them will end the feud and everything between the Montagues and the Capulets, because their families will be united. So, that's like the main reason why Friar Lawrence decides, you know what, I'm gonna go ahead with this. Yeah, it's a bit strange that you were into this girl, now you're just all of a sudden not into this girl, like a total switch up like that. But you know what, maybe this will allow your families to finally put aside their differences if you and Juliet get married. So now we move into scene 4, or if it wants to load. There we go. Oh, and then the synopsis here is that Mercutio and Benvolio meet the newly enthusiastic Romeo on the street. Romeo defeats Mercutio in a battle of wits. The nurse finds Romeo, and he gives her a message for Juliet. Meet me at Friar Lawrence's cell this afternoon, and we will there be married. Enter Benvolio and Mercutio. Mercutio says, "Where the devil should this Romeo be? Came he not home tonight?" And Benvolio says, "Not to his father's. I spoke with his man." And Mercutio says, "Why, that same pale, hard-hearted wench, that Rosaline, torments him so that he will sure run mad." And Benvolio says, "Tybalt, the kinsman to old Capulet, has sent a letter to his father's house. And Mercutio says, a challenge on my life. And Benvolio says, Romeo will answer it. And Mercutio says, any man that can write may answer a letter. And Benvolio says, nay, he will answer the letter's master. How he dares, being dared. And Mercutio says, alas, poor Romeo, he is already dead, stabbed with a white wench's black eye, run through the ear with a love song, the very pin of his heart cleft with the blind bow-boy's butt shaft. And he is a man to encounter Tybalt? And Benvolio says, why, what is Tybalt? And Mercutio says, more than Prince of Cats. Oh, he's the courageous captain of compliments. He fights as you sing prick song, keeps time, distance, and proportion. He rests his minimum rests, 1, 2, and the third in your bosom. The very butcher of a silk button, a duelist, a gentleman of the very first house of the first and second cause. Ah, the immortal passado, the punto reverso, the hay. And Benvolio says, the what? And Mercutio says, the pox of such antic, lisping, affecting, phantasimes. I believe that's how it's pronounced. Phantasimes. These new turners of accent. By Jesu, a very good blade, a very tall man, a very good whore. Why is not this a lamentable thing, grandsire, I should say, that we should be thus afflicted with these strange flies, these fashion mongers, these pardon me's, who stand so much on the new form that they cannot sit at ease on the old bench. Oh, their bones, and enter Romeo. Oh, and Benvolio says, here comes Romeo. And Mercutio says, without his roe, like a dried herring. Oh, flesh, how art thou fishified. Now he's for the numbers that Petrarch flowed in. Laura to his lady was a kitchen wench. Mary, she had a better love to he rhyme her. Ditto a dowdy. Cleopatra a gypsy. Helen a hero, hidings and harlots. This be a grey eye or so, but not to who the purpose. Signor Romeo, bonjour. There's a French solution to your French slop. You gave us the counterfeit fairly last night. And Romeo says, good morrow to you both. What counterfeit did I give? And Mercutio said, the slip, sir, the slip. Can you not conceive? And Romeo says, pardon, good Mercutio, my business was great, and in such a case as mine a man may strain courtesy. And Mercutio says, that is much as to say such a case as yours constrains a man to bow in the hams. And Romeo, I should say, meaning to curtsy. And Mercutio says, thou hast most kindly hit it. And Romeo says, a most courteous exposition. And Mercutio says, nay, I am the very pink of courtesy. And Romeo says, pink for flower. And Mercutio says, right. And Romeo says, why then is my pump well flowered? And Mercutio says, sure wit, follow me this jest now till thou hast worn out thy pump, that when the single soul is worn, the jest may remain, after the wearing, solely singular. And Romeo says, O single-souled jest, solely singular for the singleness. And Mercutio says, come between us, good Benvolio, my wits faint. And Romeo says, switch and spurs, or I'll cry a match. And Mercutio says, nay, if our wits run the wild goose chase, I am done. For thou hast more of the wild goose in one of thy wits than I am sure. I have in my whole 5. Was I with you there for the goose? And Romeo says, thou wast never with me for anything when thou was not there for the goose. And Mercutio says, I will bite thee by the ear for that jest. And Romeo says, nay, good goose, bite not. And Mercutio says, thy wit is a very bitter sweeting. It is a most sharp sauce. Romeo says, and is it not, then, well served into a sweet goose? Mercutio says, oh, here's a wit of Cheveril that stretches from an inch narrow to an ell broad. And Romeo says, I stretch it out for that word broad, which added to the goose, proves thee far and wide a broad goose. And Mercutio says, why is not this better now than groaning for love? Now art thou sociable, now art thou Romeo, now art thou what thou art, by art as well as by nature. For this drivelling love is like a great natural that runs lolling up and down to hide his babble in a hole. And Benvolio says, stop there. And Mercutio says, thou desirest me to stop in my tale against the hare. And Julio said, Thou wouldst else have made thy tale large. And Mercutio says, Oh, thou art deceived. I would have made it short, for I was come to the whole depth of my tale, and meant indeed to occupy the argument no longer. And then enter Nurse and her man Peter. And Romeo says, Here's goodly gear, a sail, a sail. And Mercutio says, Two, a shirt and a smock. And Nurse says, Peter. And Peter says, Anon. And Nurse says, My fan, Peter. And Mercutio says, Good, Peter, to hide her face, for her fans the fairer face. And the Nurse says, God you good morrow, gentlemen. And Mercutio says, God you good e'en, fair gentlewoman. And the Nurse says, Is it good e'en? And Mercutio says, 'Tis no less, I tell you, for the body hand of the dial is now upon the prick of noon. And the Nurse says, Out upon you! What a man are you? And Romeo says, One gentlewoman that God hath made himself to mar. And the Nurse says, By my troth, it is well said, for himself to mar. Quoth he, Gentlemen, can any of you tell me where I may find the young Romeo? And Romeo says, I can tell you, but young Romeo will be older when you have found him than he was when you sought him. I am the youngest of that name, for fault of a worse. And the Nurse says, You say well. And Mercutio says, Yea, is the worst well? Very well took, I faith wisely. And Nurse says, If you be he, sir, I desire some confidence with you. And Revelia says, She will indict him to some supper. And Mercutio says, Abad, so ho. And Romeo says, What hast thou found? And Mercutio says, No hair, sir, or unless a hair, sir, in a Lenten pie that is something stale and hoar, ere it be spent. And he sings this part. He sings, An old hair whore, and an old hair whore, or spelled Hoar this time around, is very good meat in Lent, but a hair that is whore is too much for a score, when a whore's ere it be spent. And it says, Romeo, will you come to your father's? Well, we'll to dinner thither. And Romeo says, I will follow you. And Mercutio says, Farewell, ancient lady. Farewell, lady. And Mercutio will exit. And and the Nurse says, I pray you, sir, what saucy merchant was this that was so full of his ropery? And Romeo says, A gentleman, Nurse, that loves to hear himself talk, and will speak more in a minute than he will stand to in a month. And the Nurse says, And he speak anything against me, I'll take him down, and he were lustier than he is, and 20 such jacks. And if I cannot, I'll find those that shall. Scurvy knave, I am none of his flirt gills, I am none of his skeins hates. And then to Peter, And thou must stand by too, and suffer every knave to use me at his pleasure. And Peter says, I saw no man use you at his pleasure. If I had, my weapon should quickly have been out. I warrant you, I dare draw as soon as another man, if I see occasion in a good quarrel, and the law on my side. And the Nurse says, Now, afore God, I am so vexed that every part about me quivers, scurvy knave. And then to Romeo she says, Pray you, sir, a word, and, as I told you, my young lady bid me inquire you out. What she bid me say, I will keep to myself. But first let me tell you, if you should lead her in a fool's paradise, as they say, it were a very gross kind of behavior, as they say. For the gentlewoman is young, and therefore if you should deal double with her, truly it were an ill thing to be offered her to any gentlewoman, and very weak dealing. And Romeo says, Nurse, commend me to thy lady and mistress. I protest unto thee. And the Nurse says, Good heart, and I, faith, I will tell her as much. Lord, she will be a joyful woman. And Romeo says, What wilt thou tell her, Nurse? Thou dost not mark me. And the Nurse says, I will tell her, sir, that you do protest, which, as I take it, is a gentlemanlike offer. And Romeo says, Bid her devise some means to come to Shrift this afternoon, and there her she shall at Fire Lawrence's cell be shrived and married. Here is for thy pains. And he's offering her money. And the Nurse says, No, truly, sir, not a penny. And Romeo says, "Go to, I say you shall." And the nurse says, "This afternoon, sir? Well, she shall be there." And Romeo says, "And stay, good nurse, behind the abbey wall. Within this hour my man shall be with thee, and bring thee cords, make like a tackled stair, which to the high topgallant of my joy must be my convoy in the secret night. Farewell, be trusty, and I'll quit thy pains. Farewell, commend me to thy mistress." And the nurse says, "Now, God in heaven bless thee. Hark you, sir." And Romeo says, "What sayest thou, my dear nurse?" And the nurse says, "Is your man secret? Did you near hear say, two may keep counsel, putting one away?" And Romeo says, "Warrant thee, my man's as true as steel." And the nurse says, "Well, sir, my mistress is the sweetest lady. Lord, Lord, when 'twas a little prating thing. Oh, there is a noble woman in town, one Paris, that would fain lay, or noble man in town, I should say, one Paris, that would fain lay knife aboard, I should say. But she, good soul, has a leaf see a toad, a very toad, as see he. I anger her sometimes, and tell her that Paris is the proper man, but I'll warrant you, when I say so, she looks as pale as any clout in the versal world. Doth now hot Rosemary and Romeo begin, both with the letter?" And the Romeo says, "Aye, nurse, what of that? Both with an R." And the nurse says, "Ah, mocker, that's the dog's name. R is for the no. I know it begins with some other letter, and she hath the prettiest sentence of it, of you and Rosemary, that it would do you good to hear it." And Romeo says, "Commend me to thy lady." And the nurse says, "Aye, 1,000 times. Peter." And Peter says, "Anon." And the nurse says, "Before and apace," and they exit. So, essentially, the nurse coming to speak with Romeo. But first, Benvolio and Mercutio finally find Romeo. They have a little exchange, Romeo and Mercutio. Romeo able to kind of hold his own. Mercutio, of course, as we've seen throughout this play, very witty, very much like able to spit out jokes and like quick wit and stuff like that. Romeo able to hold his own though. Nurse comes looking for Romeo. Mercutio jaw jacks with her, calls her old and straight up ugly, which jeez. But Romeo and the nurse discuss. The nurse tells Romeo about Paris, the person Juliet is supposed to marry, but says Juliet doesn't want him, and she says she's not really into him. So they talk for a little bit. So now up to this point, Romeo, Juliet, Friar Lawrence, the nurse, and Peter, the person that was with the nurse, all know about Romeo and Juliet and their little love affair they got going on. So Romeo's going to meet Juliet later on alongside Friar Lawrence, and now we see that here in Act 2, Scene 5. We're in Scene 5 here, and the synopsis here is: Juliet waits impatiently for the nurse to return, and her impatience grows when the nurse, having returned, is slow to deliver Romeo's message. Finally, Juliet learns that if she wants to marry Romeo, she need only to go to Friar Lawrence's cell that afternoon. So, enter Juliet, and Juliet says, "The clock struck 9 when I did send the nurse. In half an hour she promised to return. Perchance she cannot meet him. That's not so. Oh, she is lame. Love's herald should be thoughts, which 10 times faster glides than the sun's beams, driving back shadows over lowering hills. Therefore do nimble pinioned, I think that's how it's pronounced, pinioned doves draw love, and therefore hath the wind swift Cupid wings. Now is the sun upon the highmost hill of this day's journey, and from 9 till 12 is 3 long hours, yet she is not come. Had she affections and warm youthful blood, she would be as swift in motion as a ball. My words would bandy her to my sweet love, and his to me. But old folks, many faint as they were dead, unwieldy, slow, heavy, and pale as lead." And enter the nurse and Peter. And Julia says, "Oh God, she comes. Oh honey nurse, what news? Hast thou met with him? Send my man away." And nurse says, "Peter, stay at the gates." So Peter exits. And Julia says, "Now, good sweet nurse, O Lord, why lookest thou sad? And though news be sad, yet tell them merrily. If good, thou shamest the music of sweet news by playing it to me with so sour a face. And nurse says, I am aweary, give me leave a while. Fie, how my bones ache. What a jaunt have I? And Juliet says, I would thou hadst my bones, and I thy news. Nay, come, I pray thee, speak. Good nurse, speak. And nurse says, Jesu, what haste? Can you not stay a while? Do you not see that I am out of breath? And Julia says, How art thou out of breath when thou hast breath? To say to me that thou art out of breath. Good point. The excuse that thou dost make in this delay is longer than the tale thou dost excuse. Is thy news good or bad? Answer to that. Say either, and I'll stay the circumstance. Let me be satisfied. Is it good or bad? And the nurse says, Well, you have made a simple choice. You know not how to choose a man. Romeo? No, not he. Though his face be better than any man's, yet his leg excels all men's. And for a hand and a foot and a body, though they be not to be talked on, yet they are past compare. He is not the flower of courtesy, but I'll warrant him as gentle as a lamb. Go thy ways, wench, serve God. What, have you dined at home? And Julia says, No, but all this did I know before. What say he of our marriage? What of that? And the nurse says, Lord, how my head aches. What a head have I. It beats as it would fall in 20 pieces. My back out other side. Ah, my back. Beshrew your heart for sending me about, to catch my death with jaunting up and down. And Julia says, I faith, I am sorry that thou art not well. Sweet nurse, tell me, what says my love? And the nurse says, Your love says, like an honest gentleman, and a courteous, and a kind, and a handsome, and I warrant a virtuous. Where is your mother? And Julia says, Where is my mother? Why, she is within. Where should she be? How oddly thou replies. Your love says, like an honest gentleman, where is your mother? And the nurse says, Oh, God, lady dear, are you so hot? Mary, come up, I trow. Is this the poultice for my aching bones? Henceforward do your messages yourself. And Julia says, Here's such a coil. Come, what says Romeo? Oh, and the nurse says, Have you got leave to go to shrift today? And Julia says, I have. And the nurse says, Then hie you hence to Friar Lawrence's cell. There stays a husband to make you a wife. Now comes the wanton blood up in your cheeks. They'll be in scarlet strait at any news. Hie you to church. I must another way. To fetch a ladder by the which your love must climb a bird's nest soon when it is dark. I am the drudge and toil in your delight. But you shall bear the burden soon at night. Go, I'll to dinner. Hie you to the cell. And Julia says, Hie to high fortune. Honest nurse, farewell. Oh, and they exit. So, admittedly, this is a bit of like a throwaway scene. And definitely a bit more in there for laughs. Like Julia's like, okay, what did Romeo say? And the nurse is like, whew, hang on, let me catch my breath. Oh, my back. Complaining about all the stuff going on with her body. Like, oh, my back. Oh, my stomach. Oh, I'm out of breath, tired. And Julia's like rushing, like, come on. What did Romeo say? Hey, and the nurse says, oh, he's waiting for you in Friar Lawrence's chamber. And Juliet leaves out. Like, you couldn't have told me that earlier. Like a simple, oh, yeah, he's in the chamber. And Juliet calls her out. She's like, hey, you say you're out of breath, but you have the breath to tell me you're out of breath. That's like, hey, all that time you could have told me what Romeo said. Like, hey, and you could tell the nurse probably doing it partially on purpose to mess with Juliet a little bit. It kind of showing their relationship a little bit, but definitely more in there for laughs. But yes, so Juliet's going to head over to the chamber to marry Romeo. Romeo is waiting for her there, and let's meet them there in scene 6. So the synopsis here is that Juliet meets Romeo at Friar Lawrence's cell. After expressing their mutual love, they exit with the friar to be married. And so enter Friar Lawrence and Romeo. And Friar Lawrence says, So smile the heavens upon this holy act, that after hours with sorrow chide us not. And Romeo says, Amen, amen. But come what sorrow can, it cannot countervail the exchange of joy that one short minute gives me in her sight. Do thou but close our hands with holy words. Then love devouring death do what he dare. It is enough I may but call her mine. And then Friar Lawrence says, these violent delights have violent ends, and in their triumph die, like fire and powder, which, as they kiss, consume. The sweetest honey is loathsome in his own deliciousness, and in the taste confounds the appetite. Therefore love moderately. Long love doth so. Too swift arrives as tardy as too slow. And then enter Juliet. And Friar Lawrence continues, saying, here comes the lady. Oh, so light of foot, will ne'er wear out the everlasting flint. A love ever made bestride the gossamers, that isles in the wanton summer air, and yet not fall, so light is vanity. And Juliet says, good even to my ghostly confessor. And Friar Lawrence says, Romeo shall thank thee, daughter, for us both. And Juliet says, as much to him, else is his thanks too much. And Romeo says, ah, Juliet, if the measure of thy joy be heaped like mine, and that thy skill be more to blazon it, then sweeten with thy breath this neighbor air, and let rich music's tongue unfold the imagined happiness that both receive in either by this dear encounter. And Juliet has conceits more rich in matter than in words, brags of his substance, not of ornament. They are but beggars that can count their worth. But my true love is grown to such excess, I cannot sum up some of half my wealth. And Romeo says, come with me, and we will make short work. For, by your leaves, you shall not stay alone, till Holy Church incorporate two in one. And they exit. So, not only is that the end of scene 6, of course, but that is the end of Act 2. So, Romeo and Juliet getting married, they meet up at the chamber, or they express kind of similar to like their vows, or at least like profess their love for each other, and they go through with the marriage, so they're going to be legally married now. So, so she meets Friar Lawrence, and they do what they need to do. So they are now officially married in the story. So, what complications will that bring up, not just with their families, but Paris? We will find out. So that's going to do it for this episode. We'll end for Act 2 of Romeo and Juliet. So thank you all so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. Things are progressing. A bit fast, but things are progressing between our two main characters. But of course, stay tuned for next time as we tackle Act 3 of Romeo and Juliet. But thank you all so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, please do me a favor. Like, comment, subscribe, share it with your friends, turn on post notifications so you know every time I upload a video so you can see as soon as it drops. Let me know in the comments below your thoughts on the story so far, and my reading and my analysis of it. Did you dislike the story / play? Do you dislike my analysis of it? Let me know. And are you enjoying the story so far and your thoughts on it so far? But thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you guys later. Peace.